Hi, welcome to the very first episode of Very Interesting. It's me, your boy, Chris Mejia. Thank you so much for listening. Our first guest for the podcast is a special person, rapper extraordinaire, Marshall Hugh. He is the frontman of Marshall Law Band. You should give the band the follow at Marshall Law Band on all platforms. You can check out their latest single, Double Down, on all streaming platforms, or go buy their music. You can also follow Marshall as an individual at Marshall Hugh 22. Marshall is also a co-creator of the amazing and wonderful summer concert series, Fremont Fridays at LTD Bar and Grill in Fremont. It is every Friday. If you follow them at Fremont Fridays, that's where you can get information about who is local and performing. Also, on August 17th, he will be running a comedy show at Track the Tavern. So go check that out as well. Check out Marshall Law Band. Check out Marshall Hugh. Thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, enjoy the very first episode of Very Interesting. Hello and welcome to the very first inaugural episode of Very Interesting with Chris Mejia, with your boy, Chris Mejia. I'm a Seattle-based comedian, and I just love being able to have in-depth, deep conversations about honestly anything. I love being able to talk to people about what they're passionate about, what drives them crazy, and just overall really unpack the insides of like what they do, what they're passionate about, what they're driven, and like whether they're creative or not. I feel like oftentimes we're so locked into whatever our niche is, whatever our lane is, that we don't get the opportunity to show the depth that we offer as people. We're forced to be single faceted, and I feel like every person is multifaceted. So I am using this podcast as an opportunity to allow people to show that and really show how everything in the world, every field in the world is really deep and very interesting. And my first very interesting guest is a homie. He is someone who I feel like represents the Seattle music scene well, and has honestly been the person who's opened me up to the Seattle music scene. He is a member of the Marshall Law Band. You've seen him on Jam in the Van. You've seen him on BBC World Service Radio. You've seen him on the Seattle Times. His band was Chop's original house band. Please get a lot of love to the amazing, the wonderful Marshall Hugh, everybody. Make some noise.
What's going on, man?
Bro, thank you so much for being on the pod.
Hey, the fact that I'm your first guest really means a lot, and I'm a huge fan of yours, so this is powerful, and I'm excited to be here.
Honestly, well, first and foremost, I feel like it's been a minute since I've seen you. Because I feel like last time I saw you, I didn't have my hair grown out. And
yeah,
stuff.
I was looking at that. I was like, okay, this guy, he's going something different. We're getting twists. We're getting dreads. What are we thinking?
I've been embracing the natural hair look, and it's actually been like freeing because all of my life I've always had short hair, and I briefly I think 2016 had like a mohawk kind of look that like Usher used to have.
Oh,
where it was basically this, but like all the way in the back.
Okay.
And then I cut it. And then I've always been scared to do more stuff with my hair because I don't know if you feel this way, but just like living in a place like Seattle where it's mostly white, it's just like for the longest, one, it took me a long time to come to terms with like my blackness. And then two, allowing myself to express that. So like growing my hair out has actually been like super freeing.
Yeah, totally.
In that aspect.
Yeah. I had like long hair from like 2009 to like 2014 or 15. Like I was not cutting my hair. So that I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's definitely I don't know where I want to go with it. But I think I actually might want to highlight my hair.
Come on,
to what you
I got you, Cuddy. I'm inspiration, brother. I got you.
Recently, I wanted to come out to the Emerald City Gala. Wasn't able to, but that would have been an opportunity to see you there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring this all up to say we first met at BBC World Service Radio when they came to Seattle. They did the show The Arts Hour, where it was basically for those listening, the BBC Radio, they have this program called The Arts Hour where essentially they highlight arts and local scenes and stuff. They came on a US tour. They went to LA, New York, and Seattle. And you and Hollis were the two musical acts on the show. And that's where we met. And I feel like since then, through knowing you, you've really opened this world of Seattle music to me that honestly for most of the time felt hidden. And I feel like one thing that you've always done in all of the talks that you do, and whether it's interviews or like the TED Talk that you and Marshall Law Band did, you always preach this message of uniting not only just like people, but just especially the Seattle art scene and Seattle music scene. And I feel like you actually walk your talk because you did that with me to the local scene. So first and foremost, I wanted to ask, why is that such an important thing for you?
Yeah, well, like you said, it's hidden. It feels so submerged, and that's awful because this is a city that has a lot of action. It's got money, it's got creatives, it's got vibes, it's got the water, it's got the mountains. And for our art scene not to be championed like how people champion the Seahawks or how people get behind the Huskies when they're doing well, it's like, what is the disconnect there? And I feel like the main disconnect is just awareness to the access that is there. And for me, I grew up in sports. I grew up as kind of a leader. And once I got into that and noticed that problem, like, yo, I could actually be the connector and the glue that can bust open this scene for people to receive the type of support and attention and love that they deserve. And, you know, when I got into the scene, that was kind of it. I'm like, man, I'm banging my head against the wall here. I need to create some, you mentioned the gala. I need to create something that's different enough to grab people's attention, and then through that they can get introduced to all these amazing peers around me. And that's just who I am. That's kind of my vibe of like, I love seeing other people shine around me and fulfill their potential. And unless you have a stage to shine on, then you're not going to be able to fulfill your potential. And so I want to be one of the catalysts to expressing what the Seattle music scene has to the entire world. And like BBC, that was amazing. You know, the TEDx thing, that was amazing. Like, those are little platforms that was been a goal of mine when I first started, and to see it manifest and come true and to have our paths intersect in that way, it's like, oh, it's the homie for life. Like, you're on the same, whether you know it or not, you and I are really similar.
Yeah. And then that's actually, I feel like we both have this similar, like, call that to action that we want to do of like, there's this big scene that exists that it just feels like, almost like, at least in my personal opinion, I'll speak from a comedy standpoint. The Seattle comedy scene on paper has everything it needs to be one of the best comedy scenes, but it's lacking majorly. And I don't mean that in the sense of talent. I mean that in the sense of like, it feels like we're largely ignored by the local press. It feels like any single time we do something big, it just doesn't really get traction. It doesn't get support. And it feels like the only time we're recognized as a scene by the city, it feels like it's only in a moment where the city gets to have the opportunity to pat themselves on the back and be like, oh, look at us. We're propping this up. Aren't we such good people? And there's no actual like depth to their support. And I feel like there's a lot of like, I wish this scene was better, but I don't know how to make it better. But I look to you as inspiration of like, you're actually doing those things to not only make a platform for yourself, but you're giving a platform for everyone else. And one thing I wanted to ask was, as someone who's an outsider of Seattle, I'm not from Seattle. I've been living in Seattle for 9 years. Coming here, I always heard Seattle used to be a music city. I always heard that. It was always talked about the past. The present was never mentioned. If it was mentioned, it was Macklemore was basically what was mentioned. How does it feel as a musician and you're doing so much for your community? How does it feel when people are referencing Seattle as it used to be a music city? Or that I feel like oftentimes even in the press, when they're talking about things that are happening now, they always have to bring up what Seattle used to be with the grunge scene and all of that. Does it ever feel frustrating that it feels like the future is being held back because the city's holding on to the past?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you go through the stages of grief. For me, I've been in the scene so long and feel like we've been doing so many innovative and different things and seeing voids and filling those holes that I've gotten to the point to where I'm like, all what you just said is true, but what are you going to do about it? And I let my actions and my talks be a leading example for everybody around me to say, hey, this is frustrating, this is annoying, this is holding us back, but what are your choices and how are you going to overcome these issues? And I believe whether it be the gala, whether it be Fremont Fridays, whether it be us creating the mobile stage and the jelly bean, that, okay, these are our contributions and examples to other as to how to overcome those obstacles that you just described, and I wholeheartedly agree with. Now, if we can get 15 different people with that same mindset, then every single month, if we can get 30 different people, then bi-monthly, if we can get 60 different people, then every single week, you have this event that rips those pre-held notions to shreds. And it shows like, yo, this week I'm going to pull up and dress as fly as I can and represent the Seattle music scene. Or like this week I'm going to be able to shop with my local vendors. I'm going to see local music. And then I got a silent disco like we do at Fremont Fridays. Like I feel very annoyed by the fact that people say Seattle used to be used to this, used to that, or they only refer to a few artists that fit this specific mold. But it's one of those things where I've gone through every iteration. I've meditated on it. I've read books. I've done everything. And what it comes down to is, for whatever reason, collectively, we haven't done enough to change that narrative. So how do you change that narrative and how do you do that? And that's where I choose to focus my energy and keep my energy at, while still expanding into other regions and keeping my peace. I really feel like people talk about they're only going to love you when you're gone and you made it and then you come back. Like, you know, I've gone through my own iterations and understanding, you know, like Macklemore's place, because he gets referenced so often, everybody in the city who isn't in his role, they start kind of building resentment towards that. But at the end of the day, he's one man and has done a lot, and puts, if they didn't say Macklemore, then they wouldn't be saying anybody.
Right.
So the fact that we are getting to a place to at least we have some representation at all, it's on us. It's on every single artist individually. If you think you deserve that spot, then do something different and make that imprint and explode. And then when you get that opportunity, this is the big part, and this is why I move how I move. When you do get that spotlight, don't hide the steps. Don't hoard the light. Share the light with people the way that you were asking and begging for it and praying for it to be shared. So that's why, while I'm on my ascent up and we're on our collective ascent up, I choose to create platforms that incorporate other people so that they have no choice but to include them in the narrative of my story.
Right.
And so whether that's going to explode globally as I hope and pray, that's to be determined. But I can confidently look in the mirror and say, any bit of shine and light that I got, I turned around and gave it to hundreds of other people in the city.
Right.
And that is the example and the legacy that I hope to leave. And then whoever, whether it be me, whether it be any other artist, they can use that blueprint and that step to break this kind of monotony that you see and this lull that you see. You know?
Right. Because I do feel like that's very much, we all have moments where we end up, we're the victim of it and the perpetrator of it at the same time. Of like, when we're starting out in something, especially in the creative field, when we're starting out in something, we're like, why don't the old heads help me out? Like, all of the old heads are like, they stick together, they help each other out, but there's no like mentorship, there's no building. And I feel like the best scenes of any art form are scenes that the old heads are helping the new ones. But then we get to that point where once we're the old head, we're not like, we have moments where we're not turning around. Like that's even something where, especially as we talked before recording, like I'm wanting to move this year. That's something that now that my time is coming to an end in Seattle, I'm like, fuck, I've complained for so long about old heads not helping me. And then now that people are looking me as a old head, which is wild. Every time I'm like, I can't believe.
Old head, man, I'll give you 50 right now. I'll give you a bucket, boy. What are you talking? But I hear you.
Old head metaphorically.
A veteran.
Yeah, veteran. There we go.
Yeah, seasoned.
Now that I'm the vet, I'm like, oh, like, what am I doing to help the newbies? Or like, and then it becomes a question of like, I don't even know how I could help. So like, do you feel like a part of why this is so important for you to create that space? When you were new and you were starting out, did you not feel like you had that support from vets where you kind of had to either fend for yourself or maybe even prove yourself first before even any sort of vets were going to like offer some sort of help?
100%. Like that's where I feel like my story differs from a lot of people that were within my peer group, is because I got to the point where I'm all asking, like, how do I get on a Numo show? How do I get on this show? How do I get on that show? And then I'm not getting these bookings. And then I started creating my own events and then booking the martial law band within those events. They were a wider event. And then as a result, the band shined in these big moments,
right.
And then the venues came calling, and I was able to climb the ladder that way.
Right.
And it's because we decided, hey, we're going to create these different type of experiences that allow us to do what we do best. And I was complaining behind the scenes during it, but I was proactive about it.
Right.
And so now that I'm in this new position, it's imperative that I keep the same mindset of, okay, now how do I get into these, why am I not getting to open up for Climate Pledge people? Why is the Showbox not letting us do this? Why is this like, no, get creative, get innovative. And that's how Fremont Fridays have come into that.
Right.
And, you know, once I got a festival that rivals a Capitol Hill block party or rivals a bumper shoot, then I'll be impossible to ignore.
Yeah.
Just like when I had events that now rival the bigger clubs in the city, I was impossible to ignore. So it's just a change in a mindset and a hunger that has to persist while still having to deal with life stuff. And I think life kind of wears on a lot of artists. And, you know, once you've been in the game 5-6 years, you're like, man, I'm not making no money, still not making no money. I'm not getting the recognition I deserve. Like, it's over for me, you know? And I think the people that push past that barrier and are willing to stay in it and experience the ups and downs and realize you're just pursuing your passion and pursuing your art form and you're doing something that a lot of people admire and a lot of people are inspired by, then that's the mode you got to stay in.
Right. And the beautiful thing is, I feel like we're right now in this era where DIY has way more power than it has ever been, for better, for worse, in the sense of thanks to things like TikTok and Instagram, where because of these algorithms, people can create their own platforms, they can create their own audiences, and we no longer need, or at least in the comedy world, that's how it's functioning. I'm sure music is still very much different, where like independent has always been a thing with music. I feel like way more so than comedy. But these algorithms are allowing people to create those platforms. So then that way they can be like, well, these venues wouldn't book me, so I'm just create my own thing. Do you feel like now that this is such a huge DIY era, do you ever think, and actually, so a little context behind this question, with comedy, you create your own audience, where once you get to the point where these networks are like, for example, Comedy Central, like, hey, do you want a spot on our show or our showcase? It's like comedians get to a point where like, I don't really need you anymore. Do you feel like for music, with everything that you're doing in the DIY space and creating your own platforms, creating your own avenues, creating your own venues, do you feel like the need to still work with these other venues? No, like, obviously these are all legendary venues. There are things that everyone wants to be a part of. But do you feel like there are things for a career to advance? Or is it more personal milestones that it's like, it is important for me to be able to do that? And like an example is like, for me, like being able to do Bumper Shoot as like a name on the bill was like a big goal. And then the older I've gotten, the longer in comedy I've gotten, I realized I don't need Bumper Shoot. I got to perform in it, but I was like a local host, but my name wasn't on the bill. And I know that if Bumper Shoot ever brings back comedy, they're back, but they're not bringing back comedy. Like, I know that for me, getting that is more of a, this is a personal milestone than for my career. So for like stuff like the things that are still on your list, but you're still creating your own space, do you feel like you need these spaces, or is it more of like, this is important to me because these are huge icons in the city?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. And I think that it's a mix of both, because you need little milestones in your own personal life to keep you inspired and to keep you going. And the recognition, no matter what you try to tell yourself, it always feels nice. You know, I remember like my first Seattle Times article, I'm just like, wow, I'm on the Seattle Times. But then when that like fourth, fifth one rolled around, like I literally just went to go coach basketball. I sent to text it to my family. I think I got it to my family. And
someone texts you like, "Yo, you're in the Times." Like, "Oh yeah, I forgot." That's my bad.
So once you have that first experience,
right,
it does a lot for you. I think that the main thing is these are platforms, and the world is changing. And that if you aren't able to adapt and change with the world and use the platforms mutually the way they're using your fan base and you're using their name to bolster yourself into the next place, doing a show or being a part of a specific lineup doesn't guarantee you success in the future. It's being able to use that momentum, have it snowball, and create something that's sustainable, and the revenue directly goes back to you. And that's the toughest part to understand and to process. So I think it's somewhere in the middle of where you just described. Like, these are great. They're resume builders. They're awesome. But again, and this kind of goes to the Seattle mindset. It's like, hey, Seattle's what, the 10th, 9th biggest market or something like that? Like, is your ultimate goal to be the Seattle cream of the crop, or is it to have international and national impact?
Right. When people are rolling up, they know I need someone to open, or I need someone to do this. Who do I go to? Like, you're on that list. And like, that's the true goal. And
I have more. And then once you get to that goal, which I think you're there as well. It's like, you do that 6-7 times and you're like, okay, this is tight, but I have more aspirations outside of that, Right. And now it's time where it's like, when I travel out of town, when I go to these places, New York and LA and stuff, and people either encounter with me, realize I'm an artist, and then do their research, they look at me like, oh, you're one of the guys up there. Or they're aware of the Seattle scene already and they know, oh, you're one of the guys up there. But now it's like, no, I got to be one of the guys in LA. I got to be one of the guys in New York. I got to be one of the guys in London. Like,
right.
It's time. Over time, your goals and your aspirations change. And so I try not to just get too bogged up with the local scene. I try to just support everybody that I rock with. I think it's dope that they show they have a good heart. I make my contributions with the gala and Fremont Fridays. And then outside of that, it's like, because I've played all the venues that I could play, because I've played the majority of the festivals I could play, like, I don't get caught up in the politics. Like, it don't matter to me.
Right. So you actually touched on what my next question was going to be. But to dive deeper into it, so you talk about momentum and keeping the momentum up, and like looking you up, doing the research and stuff, because I've known you for a while. I know some of the stuff that you've done, but like, prepping for this has been dope because I've been able to see even more just the shit that you've been able to accomplish. So like things like Jam in the Van, which is huge, BBC obviously huge, and just everything else locally that you've done, the TED Talk that you've done, all of that is big. I feel like often, and I feel like this is most prevalent in music, where you'll have a moment and then the second you're doing and you put something out, everyone loves it. It's big. Like 12 and Pine being up in the running for a Pulitzer. Like, that's huge. And then once that moment passes, then it becomes time to do something new. And everyone's looking at you like, you did all of this stuff before. Are you going to be able to live up to it again? So when talking about doing all of these things and building a momentum, how have you found... Like, what have you found to be helpful of, okay, I had a big moment. How do I keep this going? What have you found to help you keep that momentum and not let it be like a flash in the pan?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that, as though we described it as a snowball, a lot of times it's going to be episodic. And what I've learned from those moments and what I've learned from those big things is that you really need to be mentally and physically prepared for when your number gets called again. Because once you've accomplished those things and you have the resume, then you know your number's going to get called. Right. So even if you aren't the hottest thing for this 5-month span or this and that, that's okay. Because you might just be kind of throwing superfluous stuff at the wall to try to maintain, okay, at some point, this light is going to get shined to the Seattle scene, and myself and a lot of others, we've done enough that you cannot ignore, and that name's getting brought up. And when that name gets brought up and that opportunity comes, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
And so it's kind of counterintuitive because you want to, hey, I want to be this. I want to be this. I always want to be on top. I always want to be on top. It's not always going to be your moment. It's not always going to be your time. But if you've done the work, eventually when it is everyone's time, or when it is, okay, here comes NBC or something like that, they got to include you. And then what are you going to do with that time?
Right.
And that, to me, is the biggest thing. You have to keep developing yourself as an individual. That's number one. Like, I can't tell the same stories over and over again. So I had to travel the world playing music. Now I have a global perspective to music, whereas before I was just craving, like you described it. I want to play bumper show. I want to play bumper show. It's like, no, now I've been to Battersea. Now I've been to Amsterdam. Like, I'm trying to rock those venues.
Right.
And when my story is able to be told on a global level, whether it be Netflix or Hulu, or when the time comes, it's going to be that much more interesting. So I feel like, again, what are you keeping the momentum of? The 11th biggest market that's ignored and reviewed as in the past?
Right.
That's not where I want to stay on top of.
Right.
I want to have a larger perspective for when the time comes, I'm able to flip that switch.
Right.
And I'm mentally, physically, emotionally, and content healthy.
Right.
And when that time comes, I'll push the button. Because before, I would just be pushing the button to just ascend to the top of this region. What does that do for me?
Right.
That it does a lot for me, and I'm proud to have accomplished and be a part of all that occurred. But what does that really do for me once you've already experienced that?
Right, because it's almost, and I don't mean this in a demeaning way towards Seattle. This applies to any market that isn't the giant hub.
I'm talking like L.A., New York,
right?
Atlanta. Once you're the top of those, you're the top of the world.
Right.
You're the top of Seattle. You're top of Portland. You're top of
right. But it's basically like graduating from high school. Like, you can't stay in high school forever, because there's always those people who they never left high school, and like, in metaphorically,
exactly.
And you, like, sure, they're the person of that place, but it gets to a point where it almost, no disrespect to them, becomes sad, where it's like, you're still here, but then all you do is your stuff. You don't really be out and about. But like, whenever people come through, like, who's who of the scene, you're like, oh, this person's like, but that person doesn't represent the scene anymore. So I think that's a good point of, like, you have to graduate eventually.
Gotta know, like, man, this thing is bigger than Seattle, and just, you know, I love this place so much. I love everything about it. Every time I drive from north and I see the skyline, I look over to the left, I see UW, I see the mountains, I think, wow, this might be the most beautiful place in the world.
For 2 months.
Am I gonna? Yeah, fair enough. Even the cold, when it's cold, you can see straight through to the mountains. And
when it's sunny, it's beautiful,
it's
no
awesome.
matter the weather.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I could stay here the rest of my life, but what does that do for my musical career? It doesn't, and you have to find ways to communicate differently, to talk to different audiences, and to grow, you know? So I think one of the things that I aspire to do more of is to travel, take those experiences, put them on wax, put them into content, and then market those with a budget to different places. And, you know, then the chips fall where they may.
Right.
And kind of removing my expectations of always being the person that everybody's talking about, this and that. That don't matter to me, because I've kind of insulated myself from the drama of it all, and understanding that there's a bigger picture in it. And before, it used to be like, oh, wow, this person's talking about this, and it's like so much information is just coming at you. It's like, now everyone could be talking about me. I probably wouldn't even know, because I'm just locked in with the 20 people around me.
Right.
And sometimes I'm the donkey of the day, sometimes I'm the hero. You know, it just goes up and down.
Right. And actually, to go back, you actually brought up a good point, because when you were talking about being ready for the moment, obviously that's an important thing of, like, when your number is called, you got to be ready. And I feel like that mindset really does stem, like, because you have a basketball background, you used to play basketball, and I feel like that competitive athletic nature is very visible with that mindset of, like, whether you're a starter player or you're on the bench, either way, when you get the ball, you have to be ready for that moment. You have to be prepared, whether you've been playing all game or not. But that's you also touched on another thing of, like, sometimes your moment, what you're hoping, like, you're applying for something, you're going for it, and you're like, this is my moment, and you don't get it. But then later on you get it and you realize, like, looking back, like, oh shit, it's actually better that I didn't get that moment at that time, because then when I did get it, I was ready. Because when I didn't get the moment, I stayed working on myself. I stayed working on my craft.
Exactly.
How is there a way of, when you're going for something and you're hoping that your moment is there and it isn't, how do you make sure that you stay on top of things, where you continue to work and you don't let it get to you where you're like, I'm going after these things and I'm not getting them, like, what's the point? Like, how do you avoid falling into a hole like that? Because I feel like all artists, no matter how sure of ourselves we all have those moments of like, why the fuck am I doing this?
Totally.
Like, I'm going after these things, I don't get it. I look next to me, I'm seeing people get it, whether they're homies or not. And like, when it's homies, you're obviously happy. But there's always, it's hard to not look at other people's plates when there isn't something on your plate at that time. So how do you find, like, how do you help yourself stay out of that hole so you can actually be patient for when the moment actually does come for you?
My main thing is to establish a routine and stick to it. So I know that if I'm not drinking a lot, if I'm drinking water, if I drink a smoothie, if I, put a salad in my body, if I work out and I do something creative in a day, that I will be prepared for when my time calls. If I start to think about other people, this, and that, why isn't this happening? What if that? And then the next day something happens, then I got to scramble to be ready for the opportunity. I have to keep just absolute unwavering faith that my number will get called.
Right.
And when my number is called, because I physically, emotionally, and mentally take care of where I need to be, I know that I can turn the jets on when the number is called. And you just got to have faith. And I think that some of that too is like understanding there are millions of talented people in the world, and this particular creative field that we have chose to be a part of takes a modicum of luck. Yeah. And whether or not,
which is frustrating.
It's just annoying as hell.
Which is frustrating when you can literally do every thing on the checklist they tell you to do. But you're like, but ultimately it actually really doesn't matter how good I am at this. It just matters if I'm in the right place at the right time. Like, it's so,
something's gonna have to happen for you. And I think that another thing that is very important is that your entire identity should be within the work and the consistency that you push out, and not the end result. If it doesn't go to the international millions of dollars heights that I have worked this fantasy in my brain to get to, am I still someone that I would be proud of? Right. And if that answer is yes, then you got to give yourself some grace, some space, and say, as long as I gave it my all, am I okay with the worst case scenario? Right. And if that answer is yes, then keep with it. If that answer is no, then it might be time to change something around the variable. It might be trying, whether it be career paths, whether it be, people around you. Something needs to change if that answer is no. Right. And, after, I think, doing the radio world service and getting a chance to tour the world with my music and rocking Fremont Fridays and the Gallon, those type of things, I had that experience to be like, you know what, Marshall, you have done more than when you set off thought could be accomplished. Right. Do you still have the hunger to push that further and into other realms? And I had to look at myself and say, I am content and happy with my local impact, with my national and international impact. I have a lot more to do. Yeah. So what I did to obtain this local impact, I know it won't get me to this national and international impact. Something has to change. Right. And the main thing that I decided to change was to tighten my circle and change my day-to-day routine to prioritize my own mental and physical health. Because I know I'm not going to be able to sustain what took me output of 5 to attain this local level when I know I have to put an output of 20. I can't do that if I'm doing the same habits that I was able to do 5 when I know I need to do 20.
Right.
And so that's been my journey. My journey might not, affect everybody else's or be relevant to everybody else's, but that's what I've experienced. So I'm very proud of the past, but the future I know is going to require a tighter circle and stronger mental abilities.
Right. So actually, speaking of journeys, when looking in, like doing my research, I listened to a bunch of different interviews that you've done to get even more insight into, because one thing that super fascinates me is the reality that all art involves the artist finding their voice. And just like how we as humans, we have to, as we get older, learn who are we as people? Like, what am I to existence? And not in the sense of what do I have to offer or anything like that, but more so like what is my identity? Because I feel like for so long, our identity involves around what we see and what is around us and the people around us. And then we get to a point, usually when we get older in our 30s, where we're like, I don't give a fuck about anybody else. I'm going to be me. And then it's like, well, what is me? For you, and shout out to Blake when you were on his podcast, NAS podcast. Shout out, listen to that. You were talking about how you started rapping in 2013. And at that time, your style was very different to the style that you have now, where you were pretty much, in your words, trying to be like a Wayne, or you're trying to be like 2 Chainz. And like hearing that was very surprising to me, because I'm like, that does not sound like you, because I know you now and not back then. So one thing, I have several questions about this I wanted to ask.
Awesome.
First question I wanted to ask is, one, is music similar to comedy, where in comedy, when you first start out as a comic, you are essentially doing a bad impression of another comedian until you find your voice? Do you feel like when you were starting and like rapping first, did you feel like music is similar, where you're pretty much doing what you've seen until you figured out what your voice was?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, number one, as soon as I did my first track, I got this feeling, this high, this adrenaline rush that was incomparable to anything else I'd ever experienced. So the love and the spark, that was there.
Right.
And then from there, I'm like, wait, other people feel this too? Who are the people that I know feel that spark and that energy? Oh, they're the famous people. And then you go to, Drake does this, Drake does that, or Wayne, Wiz Khalifa. I was smoking a lot of weed at the time. Wiz was huge for me, 2 Chainz was one of my favorite rappers, Nipsey during these times. And I would listen to them and then kind of mimic their content without even really realizing it. I just knew I wanted to rap, and I was so excited about the opportunity.
Right.
And then I think as I started to integrate my life experiences as true and unfiltered as possible into my lyrics and into my projection of those, that's when I started to be like, whoa, this is nothing like them. This is just me. And that is something you had to sit with and continue to sit with daily. And you're going to continue to change. And I feel like the stuff that I do and the way that I do it currently, I don't know anyone else that does it like me. Right. That doesn't mean that I'm the best to rap. That doesn't mean I'm the best to sing.
You're the best you.
I am the best me. And if someone else in the world is able to identify with how this, mixed kid is able to bring his spirit and his entity in the world through the microphone, then that's my target audience. And if I can affect one of those people positively, because that's my main outcome, then I'm doing my job. And I have to continue to grow as a human and be able to use my lyrics to guide that person that does gravitate toward my art through it.
Right.
And that, it's years long journey, and that being able to even articulate that here with you shows that I am able to process stuff, but I have more growth to do even.
Right.
And you got to just stay hungry and just fight through it.
I forget who it comes from, but there's a quote from someone who they're like, I want to say it was a musician. I want to say it was a rapper where they were like, where they basically everything changed for them once they realized it mattered less of like I'm the big thing, when they realized if I'm not the big thing, that's okay because I might birth the next big thing. It actually might have been Tupac.
It is Tupac who said, I might be the spark that changes the world. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a very good point of like, and that's actually, so one thing I wanted to ask of like going from something of like having that mainstream sound that we're all so familiar with of like something like where you wanted to be like a Wayne, you wanted to be like a 2 Chainz, and like now you've pivoted into, which I wanted to ask, how would you classify your music? And the reason why I asked that is because I feel like sometimes as artists, people be like, oh, you do like funk hip hop and all that, but then deep down you're like, I don't see it as that. Like I see it as something else.
Yeah.
So like, yes, people can Google you and see this is what Marshall Law Band does. This is what Marshall does as a solo artist. How would you personally describe your music or define it?
Yeah, I would describe it as a secular sermon. Something that if you listen to it, it's nutrients for your brain, more so poetry, more so spoken word, but something that actually has content that can enrich your life through my personal experience, that is not fabricated, that is not lies, that is not something that I've like, oh, I got a Rolls Royce and I'm it's just not that. And there are people who give that to you and create a vibe. And if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're looking for. Me, I mean, my music is like damn near a podcast of self-help, and you can hear my pronunciation correctly. There's no mistaking what I'm talking about when you hear my music. You can hear what I'm saying, and it's a direct message. And it's there for you to consume and pick the nutrients that you like out of it and hopefully make a change in your life. And that's not a lot of people do music like that. That's just how I choose to use music. And that feels good to me to put that into the world.
Do you ever feel like there's a barrier? Because like, I feel like in hip hop, anytime anyone tries to go a positive route, it's always, not always, but often, it's like clowned on, or it's like ridiculed, or it's just looked down upon. Do you ever feel like you're almost I forget what the phrase is, like going against the wind or something like that, where it's just like going against the grain, where you're like trying to, because like all of the music that you put out is very positive focused, and I mean this genuinely, never comes off corny. It's very much, it's fun, it's a good time, but like because it has that positive message and it's hip hop, do you ever feel like it's almost like you're training with weights on because you're going against the grain?
Yeah, sometimes you think like, dang, if I just like cuss more, like demeaned women a little bit better, then I'd be this, and that. But again, it goes back to your goal and being comfortable with who you are and keeping your intention. And so if I just stay in my zone, I'm not worried about the next man. I'm not worried about the person that consumes it and looks at it this certain way. I'm focused on the people that get it and the people that have come to me and said, yo, your music saved my life. The first time that's been communicated to me, I said, okay, this is why I do it. Now, I've been, I don't want to say it's fortunate enough because those people are going through it, but the fact that they feel comfortable to communicate with me, and that's in the dozens and the 50s, you know what I mean? That people have come to me and said like, I was contemplating suicide and your music was something that helped me not make that decision.
Right.
That's where my value surpasses just music, and my value actually has tangible, real life effects in people's lives, and that's where I lock in, and that's where I don't feel like I'm going against the grain. I feel like I'm in a stream of my own,
right?
And it's on me to find different ways to market this so that more people are able to have the experience that is the desired effect of my art.
Right.
And maybe it comes in my lifetime. Maybe it doesn't. A lot of the greatest artists in this world didn't get their flowers till after they died. So who am I to demand immediate gratification.
Right.
I am but a vessel.
And that's the thing, like the people who reach out to you and tell that, that is just a small fraction of the amount of people who it actually impacts, but they just don't think to reach out. Because like I've had similarly where people, like when I've like either posted comedy clips about mental health and stuff, or like just posted in general about mental health, people have reached out and been like, yo, like I was thinking to myself, like, why? I feel like I'm just shouting into the void and just no one really cares, and maybe I'm just bumming everyone out. Maybe I should stop. And then people reach out being like, oh, actually your post really helped me in X, Y, and Z.
Totally.
So I think that's a very good point of like, and almost sometimes I feel like people who don't do creative stuff, they don't understand that when we as artists talk about how much that like feeds into us, when people reach out and tell us just how much our art means to them, I feel like people who don't do creative stuff, they take it as like, oh, you're just feeding your ego. You just, that's very self-centered or anything like that, when it's just like, no, it just hits so much on a different level when you're like, I want to do this thing and I'm creating this thing that's so personal, tied to me, and I'm going to put it out there. And then the fact that there's someone out there who is like, I know this is a really wide world, but I have the same wavelength with this, and it hits so much. So it's like for you and your band, and even just you as an artist, how you have such a unique sound. My assumption is it probably just hits even more differently than just a regular person being like, oh, I'm a fan of your music, where it's like you have such a unique sound where it's like, whether it's like you would consider it niche or not, like the fact that there's someone out there who I'm like, I fuck with this. Like, does that like hit differently knowing that you have such a unique sound?
It's everything, bro. Like, it's literally everything. Like, I feel I could cater my sound to more masses and maybe it would be more commercially successful, but I don't think that the impact would be as heavy on an individual basis if it was watered down to associate to the masses.
Right.
And that's just where you got to make a personal decision. And like I talked about earlier, I am comfortable with, if I don't get another fan tomorrow, you know what I mean, in the rest of my life, I will do art because it feels good to me, and I will push it out there. And if it doesn't go to the heights in this fantasy realm I've developed and aspire to and envision and meditate on and believe that I'm, you know, have a big magnet and it's like gravitating towards me, and one day these two worlds will collide and my reality will match what I daily wake up and try to affirm. If that doesn't occur, I know that I've impacted people positively, and that alone is rare. You got to look around. There's a lot of people that are just, that don't have the ability to push themselves out like that, and they live a life that is very, even in their own description, unfulfilling, and a life of disconnect, and that isn't my life. And I have to be humble enough and appreciative enough to say, whoever, whatever, God or whatever has put me on a path to positively impact people, whether it be 3, whether it be 3 million, you got to be grateful for that. To have any sort of, like I said, it's a secular sermon, so it's like, to have any sort of congregation, you got to be blessed for that, man. You're blessed. Like, I'm so blessed to just be able to talk to you, talk to whoever's watching, and hopefully they hear and see the passion and the conviction in what I got going on, to say, like, whatever you got going on, like, do that, you know, go do that. And whether people rock with it or not, go do that, because somebody's going to feel it.
Right. So to go back, the transition in styles of when you first started to now, how did you land on, this is the sound that not only I want to do, but this feels like me? Because I think it is very much where that's a good point of like, there is a lot of pressure of like, well, what if I just change and acclimate into something more mainstream to get X, Y, and Z? But but obviously the reason why you don't is because the mentality of, I want to succeed and fail on my terms. Because it always hits different when you succeed being you versus, oh, I'm gonna do what I think the crowd wants to to hear or whatever.
Totally.
So how do you, especially venturing into something that I feel like you don't commonly hear, a sound that you don't commonly hear, how do you find your voice when your voice doesn't really exist or isn't readily available?
Yeah.
And like maybe I'm wrong where maybe there's way more bands that have the sound that you have.
Yeah.
But at least to me, I feel like every time I see y'all perform or I hear any of your songs, I feel like I'm hearing a sound I couldn't really hear anywhere else. So like, how do you find your voice when it doesn't really exist to the level that everything else does?
Yeah, I think, like I heard people describe my music as like Rage Against the Machines meets Dave Matthews Band and like all this, you know what I mean? I'm like, whoa, both of those people are already crazy and they mix together. I think, for me, the sports background really comes into play. When I was in high school, we lost in the state championship. Ooh. And to get that close and to not have it go the way that I believed it could have gone if I would have decided I'm going out on my terms, and to be a little differential to whether it be teammates or whether it be the circumstance, that woke me up and said, like, if I'm going to lose as me. And I'm going to be the one that if we lose, it's because of me. And I'm okay with that. I can go to sleep at night knowing, all right, I'm going to lose on my terms. So it's me. It's like I hear all these other people doing their stuff. This is the way that I feel most comfortable presenting myself. And the fact that I look around and I don't hear anybody else really sounding exactly like me, and I live in this weird city over there in the corner, like, to me, I'm thinking like, oh, this is a good thing.
Right.
I'm thinking like, I don't want to sound like anybody else. I don't want to be able to put into a niche. And it does create, even when we're trying to create Spotify ads, we're half the time we're sending it to some random person. It's like, I don't want to listen to this, because we don't know what we really exactly sound like. But the right people will hear it at the right time. And that's just the faith and belief you got to be in. And then I have to continue to improve individually, where it's like, getting a vocal coach was big. That was something we did about 6-7 months ago, or just starting to sing covers of songs that I do like, and just singing more in the shower and those type of things, or watching YouTube videos of songwriting and just making sure that even though I want to maintain my difference and my specialness, that I'm still adhering to the principles of the craft that I am a part of. And there's always ways to improve within the structure of it while keeping your individuality. Right. And so I draw from my personal experiences and the way that I view life as my narrative, but now I need to double back and continue to double back to improve the principles of the musical field that I'm a part of. Right. And that's what I hope to do. Who knows, in 30 years, I might be at the casino singing some Johnny Cash. I don't know.
Hey, listen, but those casino checks,
that's another aspect that I know as well, right? Being able to financially keep it sustainable is like the gigs that you want are the gigs that pay the least. The people that have the clout, they can come to you and say, hey, you're going to do this for $100. Right. And you're going to be like, I'm going to do this for $100. Then you're in the cuts and, you rock a little hotel gig or something, and that gig or the college gig that only had 100 people, that fueled your whole tour. Right. So it's humbling. I can be on a stage in front of 1,000 people, and then next I'm playing a little classroom that pays me for 20 people. And it's like, dang, how does this pay me more than this? Something's not adding up, but it's just how it goes.
Right. And that's actually, it's funny because it's like, at least for me, when I started comedy, before I started, when I was just starting, I'm like, I wouldn't consider myself I made it unless I got HBO specials, I'm doing theaters, all of this stuff. And then now, after I've been doing comedy, I'm like, yo, I've made it if I'm like, this is my job. And I get to do what I want to do creatively, whether I'm famous or not.
You gotta realize that puts you in probably the 1%, dude.
Really?
It does, bro. You gotta look around, man. You gotta look around and be like, this is my job. That alone puts you in. Now it's like, now you're competing in a different league. Right. There was in the NBA, there's 400 jobs, bro. But there's probably 4,000 hoopers that could compete for that job. Right. It's how it goes, man. You're in a different, it's time to step up.
So that's actually, since we're getting close to time, this is the last thing I want to ask before we wrap up.
Word up.
Because you used to play basketball. I mean, still do. And you coach it. And in pivoting from where basketball is, and correct me if I'm wrong, was probably your life. And then now music is your life. And I'm sure there was probably an intersection where you always had interest in music, and it just became more prevalent. But I feel like oftentimes when we're young and we're growing up, we think there's this thing I want to do and I have to make it in this. And then for some people, they do. For some people, they don't. But what we realize is, I'm meant for something else. And we have to pivot. But in that pivot, I feel like it requires you sacrificing your ego to allow yourself to be like, it's not that I failed. It's not that there's anything negative. It's just I'm realizing I'm meant for more. And this wasn't, and like I gained, the skills that I gained from this helped me be better at this. How was that transition for you? Where like, obviously you still do basketball, so you're still very involved in basketball. But to go from, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, we're probably thinking like basketball's my thing. That's what my life is going to be around, to then later on be, getting involved in music. How did you transition from a mindset of basketball's my life to my life is more than just basketball?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you grow up, you're in it, and the life lessons that you learn along the way, those stick with you. And so as I made my transition from athletics to artistic realm, it was, wow, the discipline of doing it every single day. That was the biggest gift that basketball could have ever given to me, is willing to engage every single day. Like, maybe it's not every day, but it's probably like 320 days out of 365 days a year. Like, you got to be on your job.
Right.
And that goes for any profession, anything that's going on. Like, the people that are elite and get to that level, they are doing it more consistently than the people who aren't at the elite level.
Right.
The consistency is number one. Frequency, the intensity of which you do it, and the purpose for why you're doing it. Those three things, frequency, intensity, and purpose, I learned through basketball, and specifically being a part of Watts basketball. His son of Slick Watts was Donald Watts, and now his son Isaiah Watts. They've created a basketball program called Watts Basketball. They're the ones who are allowing us to build our creative basketball league, and I'm still getting to see those two sides intertwined, but knowing that I need to have frequency, number one, it needs to be intense while I am participating in it, and I need to have a specific purpose or goal in mind while I'm trying to obtain any goal.
Right.
Those things I got from sports, and it allowed me to apply to music, community, activism, and trying to impact the world in a positive place. So you have to work backwards. You have to have your purpose. My purpose is to use my gifts to inspire people to have a positive impact in their life, no matter how big or no matter how small. That reverberation that I cause, I hope that it can bring the world and our overall consciousness to a more positive place.
Right.
No matter how incremental, no matter how massive, that is my purpose. The intensity of which I do it is, why I'm foaming at the mouth right now. You know what I mean? Like, I gotta go hard, bro. I'll pick up full court. Like, I'm in a stance. I'm waving my hands. I'm screaming about it.
Right.
And then my frequency is I gotta do this every day. And that is the toughest part, especially when life and everything is going around you. And that's something that I hope to, I feel like in 2023, maybe I did it, 75% of the time. I gotta get that 75 to 90.
Right.
And that is where I feel I don't look at anybody else. I don't ask for no handouts. I barely even ask, like, I put hundreds of people on stage. I never ask nobody, hey, book me. You know what I mean? I just say, whatever, bro. Chop it up to the game.
Right.
I put 100 of y'all on stage. Not one of y'all 100 ever asked me to be on stage and get paid. But I don't care. You know what I mean? It's for me. It's for what I do, because this is my purpose. This is the intensity I'm going to go about it. And this is the frequency that I'm going to go about it with.
Right.
And that's what sports taught me. That's what basketball specifically taught me. You know, football, I did play some football. I played basketball and football at my college at Carnegie Mellon
shit.
and stuff.
Okay.
But football teaches you something completely different. Football is like there's 53 people on the field. It teaches you that team concept and that camaraderie.
Right.
And I wasn't quite as good at football as I was. Once I got hit, I used to punt return. And then once I got really blasted and didn't call for a fair catch, and something changed. I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know, man. I'm going to go
Someone else said, this ain't for me.
I knew it.
This ain't for me.
As soon as I didn't call for that fair catch and I got sent into oblivion, I was like, hold on, man. I'm a hooper.
So, yo, I'm going to go where fouls exist.
Footballs are different. That was back in the helmet-to-helmet era.
Oh, yeah. When it was concussions was a necessary byproduct of football. Bro, I could talk to you for hours.
I'll talk, man.
We had our time, so 2 quick things before we get out of here. One, if people like the things you say and the way you say it, how can they follow you? How can they support you? Where should they go to find you?
Yes, at Marshall Law Band on everything. Anything you can think of, I'm in there. Besides Twitch, you actually inspired me. I really want to start streaming. So like, I don't know, bro, the stream guest.
Literally, once we're done, you have any questions, message me.
Hell yeah.
Because not only just me, but I can get you in contact with people who have done it for much longer.
I'd love that.
The second you start, let me know. I'm gonna send you the follow and subscribe. I got you. I got you.
Appreciate you, bro. Yeah, Marshall Law Band, everything. Tap in.
Any upcoming projects that this is probably gonna come out either in February or March? Anything upcoming that you want to tease? If not, no. Like if you want to keep on the wraps, I get it. I get it.
I think now with like our current like landscape of music and all that is like we're gonna be giving you projects consistently and just be on the lookout and know that these projects come with intentionality.
Right.
You know, there's a song called Double Down that we're coming out with that just talks about a lot what we just discussed, having your dreams, getting to a certain plateau and understanding what got me to here is going to require twice the effort to get me to here.
Right.
And that's the project that we're coming out with probably right around this time. And then there's another song called Swerve that talks about a friend of mine that passed her drunk driving, and we're pairing up with this nonprofit called Think Twice that does mobile breathalyzers, and we're hoping to have people hear those songs, incorporate breathalyzers into your daily routine and making sure people don't drive drunk.
Right.
And that's just the type of content you can expect from us. And what we're working on is just the consistency of that content. So tap in if you want to have nutrients for your ears. And that's what we're about and we're committed to being about.
And your latest single is Can't Cheat the Heems, right? Yeah, listen to Can't Cheat the Heems, fucking banger. Go listen to that. And then as we leave, since this is the first episode, I'm going to test to see if this is a segment I want to do.
Okay, yeah.
I used to do this on an old podcast I had where I would have all the guests basically assign our listeners homework. And the way by that, I mean by saying, hi, my name is, and then you say your name, and I'm going to leave you with this. And you basically, whatever you want to leave the people with, whether it's something you want people to do, something you want them to take away with, or just something about yourself. You can even like, I'm going to leave you with this. Come see me at X, Y, and Z. Like it could literally be, this is whatever you want to leave the people with. This is up to you, whether it's something we talked about or we didn't get to talk about, but you want people to know, this is the space. So all you got to do is, hi, my name is Marshall, and I'm going to leave you with this. And now the floor is yours.
Yeah, I get them right here?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Marshall Hugh of the Marshall Law Band, and I challenge you to listen to one audio book a month. You do that, you're going to be a better person, and you might want to tap in with Marshall Law Band as a little side quest.
Okay, literacy. I see you. All right.
It changes, man. You know, a lot of people, you get out of school and you like don't read anymore. And like leaders are readers. You read, man. You see how other people do it, and like I said, you know, it gives you that historical perspective. Like, who am I to demand immediate gratification when all these other people, their stories didn't get told? They're from the 1500s. Their story wasn't told until 2000 something. Like it's. What's meant for me will come. What's meant for you will come.
Right.
You got to leave the legacy, and that is dependent upon the work that you output.
Right. Hell yeah, bro. Once again, thank you so much for not only being my first guest, but for coming onto the pod. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. Keep doing the work that you're doing. Keep doing your thing. Keep being you. Yeah. Everyone, thank you so much for listening for the first episode of Very Interesting. I'm your host, Chris Mejia. We'll be back with more episodes. Until then, keep being you, do your thing, and listen to an audiobook. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.